So, let's talk Horimiya. I think we can all agree by now that this show just doesn't mind getting dirty when it comes to relationships. So, let's talk and analyze the interactions that we saw on episode 10. And if you haven't watched it yet, what is wrong with you? Just go watch it now. It's amazing. So, let's see what makes it so amazing though. A quick refresh, first of all, when it comes to relationships, that the ones that will be developed in this episode. Right now, Toru and Yuki are pretend dating, and that's because she didn't want to go out with Yanagi. But Sakura has liked Toru for a little bit and has finally confessed. So we are now going to follow the situation from the moment in the episode when Yuki comes back to school, and we'll see onward what happens between all of them. First, let's comment on the direction and what it symbolizes, because honestly, the visual medium is even better used here than in the manga. What we can see is that when Yuki comes back, Hori, as her bestie, is the first to notice and runs off to her, as expected. But we now notice that Toru's and Mia's responses are different, as well as their points of view. Mia sees Yuki's outer self, which some episodes ago was explained by Hori to be a farce whenever there's something that Yuki wants. So he is completely unable to comprehend that part of Yuki, and he just comments that she looks good. And as we see, the point of view of his is that's farther away and puts Yuki behind the group, so he cannot focus on her and see behind that farce. But in Toru's case, it's different. He immediately notices something is off, we can see by his face, and the next shot shows it. His perspective is not far away like Miyamura, but it's really focused in on Yuki, to the point that even his ex-crush, Hori, herself is out of focus. And this is what we saw in the class. But now let's jump to the rooftop conversation. First of all, the setting. The rooftop is a very wide space and an open space, so people are free to move around and do what they want. But there is still only one door, so whatever happens, a mutual resolution has to occur, because the only way out obligates you to go through that door with the same person you came in. But next, let's focus on the conversation itself. First, Toru says that Sakura didn't want an answer, or didn't need one, at least, which obviously baffles Yuki, because she has no reason to believe that Sakura would confess if she didn't want an answer at the very least. Then Toru says it's because she wanted to get that off her chest, something that Yuki, being completely incapable of asking for what she wants since a child, will never be able to do. So Yuki now asks Toru why he didn't correct the misunderstanding, to which he replies that he didn't feel like he had to do it. Well, this response tells Yuki that Toru isn't certain about bringing up the truth, so she asks dead on what his response would be if he had no excuses. To which Toru gives an answer that shows that he's not interested in Sakura. And now the real beauty of this conversation begins. Yuki comments how Toru probably won't be getting any more Sakura cookies, which shows Toru that Yuki knew and was self-conscious of the fact that Toru liked Sakura's cookies. But Toru now brings the conversation back to Yuki's cookies at this point, even if they both know they didn't taste as well as Sakura's. Now, the next scene shows Yuki's inner thought process. First, she calls herself a bad person because Sakura actively sought Toru and gave him cookies, and even worked up the courage to talk to him, even confessing while knowing how he felt. Which, as we see in even the next scene after, puts Sakura in the Yuki's point of view next to Toru, while she's alone looking from a distance, not taking any action. She is still relieved that Toru isn't going with Sakura, but since Yuki herself doesn't take steps to close the relationship, she still sees the possibility of Toru not reciprocating her feelings either. And we now see the comparison that Yuki makes between herself and Sakura. Sakura is like a warm cherry blossoms, and Yuki is like cold, gross snow. So that's her point of view of herself because of her actions. But let's get on with this scene and just understand how beautifully the meaning between these words can be taken and how Toru answers her. He definitely understands that Yuki is being defeatist by now and that she doesn't want to fight a battle that she's almost won because Toru likes her. But when we see the flashback, we get it that Toru has also stakes in this fight. He's happy to be with Yuki, and he wants both sides to put effort. So he tries to help Yuki out. We'll now translate the sentences as we go forward, just to see what Toru really means when he says these things. First, he talks about the snow doesn't melt just because it's spring, the snow melts because it decides to melt on its own. Which is him saying to Yuki, you shouldn't give up just because Sakura likes me, you should only give up because you decided on your own. Then he continues. No matter how badly everyone wants to stick around, the snow makes its own decisions to melt. That's why it melts. You got that? So, once again, Toru saying to Yuki now, it doesn't matter if others want you to give up, you only give up when you want it. That's when you can give up. It's by your own decision. Yuki doesn't really understand the point that Toru is making because she's unconsciously berating herself when she talks about the snow and not doing that on her own accord. She doesn't understand she's doing that to herself. So Toru calls her out on her own comparison now by saying, so you think the snow melts because the Sakura blossoms asks it to? And this is when we see this scene that shows the window to the soul that are Yuki's eyes and that Toru actually got in her head with that one. But since old habits die hard, Yuki just jokes instead of furthering the conversation. But she now understands that at least he's with her, he understands her fear and her feelings, and even if she can't say them yet, it makes her happy. And I just gotta really call out that Toru says he's not stupid as Yuki is, because we completely saw through his facade and he can understand feelings and help her to become a better person now. This is affirmed by immediately after Toru calling out that this smile of Yuki's is the only true smile all day that she gave, showing that Toru can in fact see through her facade. And he's very delicate now when he holds her finger. The cold snow Yuki right now is actually pretty hot and embarrassed in this instance, which is very much a comparison to what she said before about herself. And then this scene ends, at least the points we are talking about. So let's now see and talk about the last part of this episode. First, we see that Sengoku has a distorted view of the situation. He calls out that Sakura, seems a lot happier, but he can't really tell why all that is just yet. And now we go into the student council office. We start with Sengoku just trying to understand the situation a bit better. Sakura is happier, not because someone did something good to her, for example, accepting her feelings, but because she did something good to herself, putting her feelings out there. Like Sengoku said, taking a weight off her shoulders. And the scene starts off by focusing completely on Sakura's viewpoint, to the point that when Sengoku is talking to her, he becomes part of the foreground, basically with the music. We start to comprehend a little bit better Sakura's emotions at this point and just her response to this whole ordeal. She's trying to cope, and when she focuses on Toru and he sees him being happy, it makes her happy. But not being the person that is on his side only makes the wound on her feelings that she currently has by not being reciprocated only bleed more. And the fact that we can't see her eyes very well shows that right now she's hiding her feelings. She might be bleeding, but she doesn't want others to know it. But when push comes to shove, literally in this case, she can't keep her composure, and Sengoku sees her eyes, showing her emotion, and as a friend, the only thing he can ask is what happened. Now, Sakura can be frank with someone she knows she can trust, but she still tries to hide her pain. When she answers, she puts up a fake smile and while explaining how she was rejected even before being able to ask her crush out. And once again, we can see her eyes because she's trying to hide how much pain she is in, both to the audience and specifically to Sengoku in this situation. But Sengoku tries to help her by saying that the guy that did that to her must have been a fool, that there's no reason for someone to reject her, but the more reasons she gives Sakura for her feelings, the harder those feelings are to contain. And we actually feel that because as her feelings swell up, also do the strings on the music playing keep swelling up. The playing is constantly pushing high notes that denote the suffering and the agony that Sakura is going through as she tries to just cope and understand the situation, why it's happening to her. but increasingly in volume, those feelings, those emotions, and the music get too strong to be held in any longer. And now we can see her eyes again. Her feelings start coming out, and as her crying and sobbing fills the room, so do the string notes fill the scene. And Sengoku can finally put the pieces together. And he says the line that most encompasses this entire situation. This only hurts more because nobody's in the wrong. Sakura did her best. And even if Yuki didn't, for all intents and purposes, Toru is still the one that makes the choice. So, at the end of this episode titled Until the Snow Melts, we see the snow falling, as it cements the new relationship between Toru and Yuki, because this time, at least, the snow decided not to melt just yet. And these are my thoughts on episode 10 and why I think this episode is just brilliant. This show has been amazing in many aspects. Many people have talked about it. But if someone still had any doubts that Horimiya could be a great romantic comedy, this was pure romantic development that is just not seen many times. Usually, unrequited love is not something that is shown, or if it is, it's used almost as a gag and then it's solved by some other character appearing. But in this case, Sakura just didn't get what she wanted, and we feel her pain with her. We, most people, were looking at her, and we just some didn't know, so others knew because they were manga readers. But seeing this and understanding this is something that was beautifully done through this episode. I think that people that don't like this episode probably just haven't passed through the same situation, and so they just can't relate properly and feel empathy in the same way that others can. So that's all that I have to say then. Thank you all for watching. If you've gone all the way this far, it means you probably don't hate my voice just yet, so thanks for that, I guess. And this is pretty much a one-off project. If I do more stuff like this, hope you guys watch it as well. But until then, I'll see you next time.